Welcome to another episode. I've got on the line with me today a representative from ZenCash. You know him, you love him, you want more of him. It is Mr. Rowan Stone, all the way from Scotland. Rowan, how are you?
I'm good, yeah. How about yourself?
You know, I'm doing all right. I think we mentioned both before the call that we're maybe a little bit underslept, but that is known to happen in this space. Tech startup, blockchain, yeah. I mean, it's not like none of you guys are working hard on any projects or any integrations for the future roadmap.
Nothing like that. I'm running on about 3 hours sleep just now, so we'll do our best. We're here. Let's make it happen.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you being game for this. And what I'd like to do is let's start with some of the standard questions that I ask most of the projects. Let's go ahead and pretend like this, as though this were a VC panel interview, and as the viewers down below, that not all of them are going to be ZenCash fans today, but they actually, at their core, in their hearts, they want to be. They just need you to prove a couple of things for them, right? They need to get past their skepticism, a lot like how VCs are, right? Bit of a stone wall up front, but as soon as you've won them, you know, they love you. So here are the questions. The first thing is, with the ZenCash team, when did ZenCash first see a problem? Because the history is that ZenCash is a fork of Z Classic, right?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so what was the problem? What did the team want to solve?
So the kind of original problem was a mixture of things. I mean, the original intention was to pull in the best parts of a number of different projects. So Z Classic at the time was a great project, but they were wanting to stay very pure in their message and in their roadmap. They basically just wanted to try and make what they were doing as great as it possibly could be without really building anything additional on top. So a few members of Z Classic got together and decided that they could create a new product, as it were, and pull in kind of what they saw as being really cool parts of a bunch of different projects. So they kind of took inspiration from the Dash governance model. Obviously, they used the core ZCash tech, so ZK snarks for privacy, and started layering from there to really start building out what Zen is today.
Okay, phenomenal. Okay, it sounds like a lot of projects that I'm speaking to so far, they see only a few things that they really want to change, but then they wind up sort of cherry picking from other projects and saying it's not necessarily just a fork, it's kind of a fork merge or a spork or a hybrid. It's something more. If we wanted to just fork, we may have just stayed part of that community and been more vocal. Do you think that's true of ZenCash? Was there an absolute need to fork, or was it more kind of like, we just have big ideas and we know they won't want to implement what we have?
Yeah, I mean, so it wasn't a kind of malicious fork in any way, shape, or form. So the conversation was had around the ideas that the Zen team wanted to implement. And it was decided between the whole group of people that the best thing to do was for Zen to kind of fork off, go their own way, do it in a nice way.
Wait, I need you to say that one more time in Scottish. Say fork off. I'm
fork off.
And whatever you do, I won't ask you to say burglar. It's rude. Sorry. I've seen too many UK interviews where the Scot gets picked on, and I may have said too much already. I'm sorry.
Hey, we do exactly the same thing to you guys, so it's all good.
I know. We're the worst. Please, everyone forget George W. Bush exists. Too late.
He's the least of your problem.
Currently, yeah.
Yeah.
But so it sounds like then not a malicious fork, definitely something that the team just had really strong ideas for, right? They really had a strong sense of direction. And it sounds like if they could have, they might have tried to work with the existing development teams out there. But it sounds like they just, that wasn't really an option then.
Yeah, I mean, potentially they could have made their voices heard a bit more, but the kind of whole idea was to create something new. Start from scratch and really create what they believed the perfect cryptocurrency project looked like. So that's kind of how Zen came to be. And really early on, they started implementing kind of improvements to the core code base they forked from. So one of the first things they did was to try and decentralize as best as possible by introducing a node architecture. And then on top of that node architecture, layering TLS, so all the internode communications encrypted. So that's kind of one of the first things. And then from there, start building out products.
Right. And I want to say that just at least based on the press from the ZenCash website, that the TLS encryption from node to node, that it was an industry first, actually. You were first to market with that.
That's absolutely correct, yeah.
Okay,
absolutely.
Cool. I occasionally I read. Occasionally I actually read about people I'm interviewing. Yeah. Take that.
Who'd have thought it?
Yeah, right. Take that, Max Kaiser. I'm just kidding. I am no Max Kaiser. I know. I need to go a little more white, and I need to be a lot more cool. But let me ask you, as far as the projects that, like the grand vision that ZenCash wanted to bring to bear, I noticed when doing that homework that there's quite a bit of functionality that ZenCash apparently intends to bring to crypto, not just cryptocurrency, but a lot of functionality in terms of I don't want to say utility token because that's like a buzzword, right? It's inherently meaningless. But in terms of just utility of what ZenCash can become and what the core code can offer, what I saw on the site for the roadmap were a couple of things that kind of piqued my interest. And then something that for me, I'm just going to shoot really straight, was a bit of a downer. And the downer was ZenChat, actually. The repo hasn't been touched since late last year. And so I downloaded it, and even when I went to the executable, because I'm on Windows for this machine, it's just it's how I have to operate for broadcasting. But I downloaded the Windows executable, and it even had the disclaimer: this is alpha. Might have even said pre-alpha. I mean, we barely passed release candidates here. Yeah. What's going on there? And let's talk about the roadmap. Some of these other functionalities, ZenPub being one of the other ones. And then it's ZenHide is the other, right? That's on the roadmap.
Sure. So ZenChat is kind of minimum viable product. It was almost a bit of a freebie. So we're making use of the small amount of bytes that you can have within a transaction. So the way ZenChat works is that it's shielded transactions with a small text. You can either send one-to-one or one-to-many. And it's clunky, it's slow, it's not meant for mass market. It was something we put out essentially for the Julian Assanges of this world that absolutely need complete secrecy and privacy. So if you want to send a message to somebody and you don't mind that it's going to take a few minutes, it has to be secret, then it's a great application to do that. And in future, we will for sure be developing on it further and probably making something a bit more bespoke that we can wrap in potentially even to a piece of hardware and have it as kind of a ZenChat device. But at the moment, it's not one of our kind of core goals to get that moving quickly. What I will say though on the GitHub front, it's quite important people understand how we work. So we're completely open source, and our core technology will continue to be open source. We don't, however, always develop completely in the open. So what we do is we develop products quite regularly in private repositories. We get them to a point where we've battle tested them. We're super happy that they're pretty robust. And then we release them upon the wild and stick them into our proper open GitHub. So it quite often looks like in my day-to-day role, I speak with exchange partners and businesses and integrations. And one of the questions that they always ask is, why should GitHub not got that much activity on it? And it's a kind of a red flag for them. It makes them go, hey, Zen aren't that active. And it couldn't be further from the truth. We're doing a huge amount of development. We've got 3 completely separate development teams, all working absolutely flat out on a bunch of different stuff. But it's just behind the scenes, almost ready, and it'll be moved into GitHub pretty soon.
Got it. Okay. And it sounds, and I totally get that. It makes perfect sense. I mean, far better to make sure that you have something that's polished that you then contribute so that it's net positive to the open source community, as opposed to always pushing your junk code with like no comments and just totally broken all the time, right? Waiting for somebody else to bug fix for you. I get that. Makes a lot of sense. In terms of ZenChat being minimum viable product, you mentioned having there potentially be a hardware product. I just had one feature request there. I want it to look like, Home Alone 2, the Talk Boy device.
Oh, yeah.
That Kevin McAllister has. If you could shape it like that, please. And then, I'm not asking for a royalty. Hey, I'm not greedy, but please, enough. Feature request. Please escalate that, if you would. Bubble it up to the top levels.
I will make sure our director of technology is fully aware of that request. No problem at all. I've actually heard somebody else say that they want it to look a bit like the Pip Boy from Fallout. So you're not the first person to have a kind of specific request.
Either that
there's a few options out there.
Yeah, or Solid Snake's codex, right? So you got options. Yeah, definitely, for sure. Okay, so it sounds like then there is some development manpower going to that, but it's been a little bit deprioritized because you've reached that minimum viable product. It is a bit of an offering to show, hey, look, it can be done. We've got other problems to solve at the moment. And we'll get around to some of those problems because clearly crypto in general and proof of work in general has experienced a lot of, I'm going to use the term resistance lately. There's been a lot of potential pitfalls, right? A lot of and several bad actors that have come out of the woodwork to say to basically prove that there are threats to the livelihood of several projects. So we'll talk about that in a moment. But as far as other projects that are proof of concept, other projects that help to show that ZenCash has the chops, the team, the ability to deliver something more than just a coin, than just a currency. ZenPub and ZenHide. What are these?
Yeah, so ZenPub, before I go into explaining them, so our main kind of core mission this year and next year is in two places. It's utility. Let's make ZenCash as useful as physically possible. And that means lots of different things. So it means let's integrate in as many different places. Let's allow our users to spend their Zen in lots of different areas. But it also means let's make our products actually useful.
Yeah, so I apologize for the interruption. You mentioned spending in as many places as possible. I noticed that OpenBazaar integration is meant to already be in play. Is that via Shapeshift, or is that some other way? Is that the work that your team has done?
Yeah, so we've been working to implement with OpenBazaar. We've had a couple of minor bumps in the road. OpenBazaar team tweaked the kind of criteria for how they were listing, and they tweaked some of the requirements they wanted crypto projects to have, like an SPV wallet and things like that, before they jumped into the platform. So we're still working on it, and we will for sure be pushing ahead with that. That's a great use case for Zen. Great platform. So yeah, the two things are, let's really focus on utility and let's focus on usability. So for us, those are the kind of two biggest barriers between crypto and the masses. Crypto's too complicated and isn't useful enough. So that's the kind of two things that we're really trying to get our teeth into. And ZenPub and ZenChat and ZenHide are kind of the first iteration of what we think are useful products that we can launch on top of Seth. Okay. So just to talk a little bit about them, ZenPub is a kind of distributed file storage system. So it's kind of utilizing our massive network of nodes. Just briefly touching on that, we currently have over 12,000 secure nodes in operation.
Over 12,400, but who's counting?
Well, you know, like. But yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, we launched that network back in November, and already we have such a phenomenal, robust kind of core infrastructure to build upon. So it's great. So the distributed file storage system, potentially leveraging some of the storage within those nodes. So that's ZenPub. And the kind of whole idea was to enable people to publish whatever they need to publish without fear of repercussion. So they can publish something fully transparently and say, hey, this is Rowan, and here's my PDF of stuff. Or they can do it anonymously. They can use ZK snarks and create a publication in that way. Okay. So that was ZenPub. ZenHide was about ensuring that people had access to ZenCash no matter where they are in the world. So if there's any listeners in China, for example, it's a great example. They are unfortunately working behind a fairly substantial firewall, and that restricts their access to the free web.
Right. I'm not syndicating through Weibo. Sorry.
It's okay. So yeah, ZenHide was all about enabling people access to our products and in the future the wider internet through our network.
Okay, awesome. So a bit of VPN functionality then built into some of the other like wallets and other applications coming from the ZenCash team?
Yeah, the intention was to do it in a domain fronting way. So more spoofing the ISP into thinking you're in Amazon or Google or something like that, but in actual fact, you're in the ZenCash network and you're doing whatever you need to do. The kind of spanner in the works is that a lot of these big organizations, the Amazons and Googles of the world, have been cracking down on domain fronting, which makes our job of implementing it significantly more difficult. So it's still in the background. We're still working on it. We just haven't quite decided which way we're going to progress with that yet. Got it.
Well, hey, just another suggestion here. Talking to the Loki team, and it's in their white paper. They're using I2P, and they're using an iteration or a derivative of the I2P protocol in order to assist with their node-to-node encryption and service network.
Oh, very cool.
Something to reach out about. That's half. You got to know, Rowan. Half the reason I'm doing these interviews is because I want there to be open discourse between projects. In crypto winter, it's like literal winter, right? I mean, it's in big coat season. You go to the gym and you push extra hard so you look good when you take your clothes off again, right? Just saying.
Yeah, fair enough.
We're all prepping for crypto summer, right? Every project wants to look as appealing as possible to and just yeah, absolutely improve the net sex appeal of utility of crypto. Exactly. I'm hearing it everywhere. We're all
here for the same reason. So working together is clearly the right way to really achieve that goal and get crypto to the point where it's actually useful. And I don't want to say to the point where it's useful, because clearly there's a whole group of us using it absolutely every single day. I mean, I live my life entirely in crypto now. I basically don't hold any fiat. So it's silly for me to say it's not useful, but you know what I mean? I mean, really get it to a point where mass market can go, hey, we need this. This is part of our daily lives now.
Right.
So, yeah, for sure, we need to get to that point. So yeah, I mean, just quickly going back to your question. So the applications that we have in progress, so ZenPub, ZenHide, there's also ZenGrid, because our node network is basically a giant supercomputer. So ZenGrid is aiming to shard that network up and then effectively rent it out. So computation for rent as a service, and another way of providing revenue for our node operators.
Phenomenal. And to what extent will this trickle down into proof of work? And this is the heart of the conversations that I'm trying to have with any project that is leaning heavily on proof of work.
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
So to what extent will ZenGrid include mining? So you mentioned for node operators the possibility of being able to rent compute, but clearly the mining network is just so much more expansive. I mean, Ethereum alone, it represents over 18 million GPUs.
Yeah. So the ZenGrid is more about renting out CPU power. So I mean, yeah, you could rent a whole bunch of CPUs and point them towards Monero or something like that and use them for mining. The difficulty we've got is that a lot of the...
Sorry, that'd be kind of weird. Like, we're going to get all the ZenCash CPUs to mine Monero.
Yeah, we're all friends. But the reason I said Monero is that they're still kind of pretty open to CPU mining. And you would need a hell of a lot of CPUs to really make any money mining Zen, because we're already at a point where GPUs are dominating and we're already seeing ASICs come into play pretty strongly. So there's a couple of them on the go now. So yeah, there's a possibility, but the costs of renting big shards of network and computation for rent, it's pretty expensive. I mean, mining is possible, but it wouldn't really be a good use of your funds, if you like.
Sure. Yeah, poor value proposition there. I've got a question from Discord right now, and Todd MCK asks, the biggest question that keeps coming up to me is hash rate centralization inevitable? If not, what technology or technologies have the most promise for keeping mining decentralized? I think this is on the mind of a lot of miners.
Really important question, yeah, for sure. So the natural evolution of technology isn't something that we can delay forever. That's the kind of real end answer. So when we're talking about preventing ASICs joining the market, we're talking about pros and cons of whether or not that's something we should be doing. And there's lots of pros. If we look specifically on ZenCash, the biggest pro in my mind isn't actually to ensure that our current crop of GPU miners are still able to mine it and that everything is really nicely decentralized. It's slightly more selfish than that. It's that there isn't enough Zen out in the market already. So we're at a point where we have 4 million out of 21 million. So obviously, caveat, I am a GPU miner. I also run ASICs. I'm in my mining facility right now. I have a pretty substantial amount of graphics cards on Zen, and I fully support the GPU mining space. I think it is really important that we have a really low technical and financial barrier to entry. However, the real reason that I think we should fork as ZenCash is to ensure that we don't end up with the majority of the coin supply in the hands of the few. With only 4 million out of 21 million currently in circulation, if we bring ASICs into the fold permanently, Bitmain, for example, are probably mining Zen at the moment. It'd be silly not to, because we're quite often in the top 3 for profitability.
And the Z9 Mini is already shipped.
It has, yeah, it has shipped. There's a number. So one of the co-founders of ZenCash, Rolf Verslu, who I'm sure a lot of your listeners are well aware of, he has a Z9 in his hand already, and as soon as it arrived, tore it apart, took some cool pictures, and tried to suss out what it actually is. So how do we prevent them hitting the network? First thing we need to solve is what exactly are they? And even now, after ripping them apart and taking some really cool detailed pictures, I'm not entirely sure we really know. And speaking to a number of the other Equihash projects, I think the feeling is it's pretty mutual among everybody. So we have a few assumptions that we've made, going by what the boards look like and going by what we think the hardware is, that parameter change could be effective. But it's going to take a bit of time to realize whether or not it could be effective for a couple of weeks or whether or not it's actually going to be effective for the foreseeable future.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you being very, very open about that vulnerability, or about the question mark the team has over their heads regarding this. Because I know there are a lot of teams, and I'm privy to a couple of great conversations that are happening with several teams. Some of them on EquiHash, some of them on other proof of work algorithms, talking about the potential threat of ASICs and what that means. Because air quotes ASIC resistance is kind of it's a difficult problem to approach, because most people concede that the march of progress is unstoppable. So as Moore's anything to which Moore's law applies, right? Whether it's a die shrink or it's transistor count going up, any new technology poses a threat. So depending on how you design new hardware, anything could come up to threaten proof of work in some meaningful way. The E3 miner that supposedly does Dagger Hashimoto well, right? Ethereum was supposed to be the king daddy of ASIC resistance. Not so. So it seems like, and then Monero as well, right? They really thought the Kryptonite was going to be the way forward, and now Bitmain slowly ramped up their test bench to like 4 megawatt, then 10 megawatt. I mean, they just like they could have crushed anything. They could have owned any network they wanted to with their test bench, which is kind of scary.
The difficulty is the strength and resources of the organizations that are in play. So the entire market cap of ZenCash just now, for example, is what it floats. We've actually taken a bit of a hit recently, but we're around about $90 million at the moment. So that is only a small fraction of the monthly profit of a company like Bitmain. So if they want to create an ASIC for any algorithm we move to, or any existing algorithm they could probably very likely be researching already, they could do it pretty quickly. And that's the kind of question mark over this parameter change. Is it worth us putting effort into doing and expending resources to gain 2 or 3 weeks of ASIC resistance before the next batch of Z9s are shipped with a 1445 or a 209 parameter compatibility? Or is it actually going to buy us 3-6 months? If it's going to buy us 3 to 6 months and it's only going to be kind of 3 to 4 weeks worth of work, then obviously that's a fantastic route forward, and that's kind of the way we should be going. But I think ultimately we need to be looking past the simple fixes like parameter changes and really trying to see how we're going to really fix the root of the problem.
Awesome.
And there's a couple of things we could do there. We can either move to an entirely different algorithm. R&D is kind of really important to the ZenCash organization, so we could task our R&D division with piling the resources into creating something bespoke from scratch, designed entirely to be ASIC resistant, or we could move to something that already exists. I saw your interview recently with Ogoda Girl, from Proof of Work. And I mean, a good few members of our team are quite positive about that algorithm and how that would work. And it's a serious option we need to be looking at. There's lots of different options.
Great. Well, I know the entire Prog POW community is, they were in the comments of the intended live stream that we had to cut. They were in the comments already. They were pre-gaming saying, when Prog POW, and asking like, they very much, I mean, there's a huge growing movement of Prog POW. For my part, as a reviewer and somebody who, yes, I do consult mid-scale and large-scale mining operations. I don't run my own mid or large-scale mining operation, but I do have to disclose that I have an interest in mining, right?
Sure.
However, attempting to be an objective reviewer, I've got to say, I love Prog POW. I love the concept. I love that it speaks to the unique properties of GPU as a hardware platform. But I have to keep my mind open to the possibility that there are other proofs of work that are inherently useful, where Prog POW is inherently difficult. It's not necessarily inherently useful.
Sure.
So for me, I've been asking this to a lot of guests on the show, or on the channel. When I say the words proof of useful work, what comes to mind for you?
See, that's for me a bit of a misnomer, because I see proof of work as being extremely useful. I see it as being a very expensive way of gaining absolute immutability. or in theory, absolute immutability. We're clearly in a landscape where you can rent huge amounts of hash power and you can use that hash power to undo your transactions, which makes a little bit of a mockery of the immutability, which is why we're focusing resource on fixing the issue of 51% attacks or the Satoshi consensus that allows them. But for me, the work going into that immutability is extremely useful.
No, and I would agree. I would agree. I just where I categorically disagree is that it's not inherently useful. Inherently, sure. It's cryptography, and inherently, cryptography is useful for privacy, but not necessarily. And privacy is a necessary condition of all blockchain, of course. But the proof of work that's happening on every blockchain, there could be alternate proofs of work or hybrid proofs of work and even hybrid proofs of consensus that are brought together to make something that is inherently useful, which attracts inherently good actors to the scene. And it's not that it eliminates bad actors from the scene. They're always, anytime there's value, right? Bad actors come in to try to take it for free.
Yeah. There's huge mathematical problems all around the world that could be computed instead of us doing essentially checksum puzzles. I completely agree with that. Is it something that we're going to take on as a kind of way forward for Zen? Probably not, but I would love to see a project do it. I would love to see a real world, genuinely useful proof of work. I think that'd be amazing.
Awesome.
Going back to the question you were asked. So kind of long term, how are we going to really try and tackle the centralization or the presumed centralization of hash power? I think one of the biggest issues is the difficulty. So as difficulty rises exponentially, it becomes more and more difficult for small guys to jump in at the bottom and really do anything meaningful. For example, in Bitcoin just now, the jump in hash rate, even over the past month, is huge. It's went up something like 15% in the past couple of weeks.
Oh yeah, so, I had a well-wisher. They offered me a B8. One of these Bitfury B8s, 50 terahash machine to review. And I'm like, actually, I can't even plug it in here in the office to review for the show. And even if I could, I would net like $2 US for the day, and I'd burn like $20.
Yeah, those machines do chew a lot of power, a huge amount of power. So for ZenCash, one of the things that we have in our roadmap already is trying to tackle the scaling issue. Because if we're going to get any kind of mass market adoption, we really need to have scaling in the bag and nailed long before it becomes an issue. And the kind of way that we're looking at the moment is potentially moving from a kind of typical linear blockchain into a kind of directed acyclic graph, so a DAG architecture. And the reason I bring that up just now is that has the potential to collapse the difficulty for mining. And by collapsing the difficulty for mining, you kind of remove the real advantage of what an ASIC has. Because if everybody can mine with a CPU and mine in a meaningful way because the difficulty is so low, by a function of the way that we can allow lots of concurrent blocks to be solved at the same time, then the decentralization of hash power becomes a much easier problem to chew.
Right.
At the moment where difficulty is exponentially increasing, that's a really hard problem to get around. And in my perspective, taking my ZenCash hat off and just being a miner, I'm not convinced that chopping algorithms all the time is really the right solution. I think it's a great way to extend and kind of keep them at bay for a little while. But long term, I don't see it as really adding any value to the space.
I totally agree. Unless you're willing to create a bespoke algorithm for every project.
Yeah.
In which case, then you can safely say like, okay, well, we own our entire network. We don't have to worry about the nice hashes of the world, because the only people hashing our algorithm are people who are on our network.
Exactly. And that's another big issue with, so the kind of favored parameter change for Equihash just now, among certainly the coins that I've spoken to, the majority of them are looking at 1445, which is going to basically take the memory requirements to just shy of 3 gig. So 1060s will still be okay, which is great. Because I know a lot of miners out there have a huge volume of these things. But if everybody jumps to 1445, there's a very large incentivization pool there for any number of asset companies to come along and go, hey, 1445, that's a great idea. Let's make a miner for that. And then we're just back to where we were or where we are now. So yeah, it's a really hard problem. And there's a huge number of super frustrated miners out there that are seeing their profits dwindling and seeing their hardware costs not being paid back yet, that want answers now. And unfortunately, it's not something that we can answer now. We need to do research. We need to figure out how we're going to spend our resources, and we need to take a bit of time to really nail it properly.
Right. I think I was very vocal in some of the forums as well. I hope I didn't wreak too much havoc in the ZenCash forum, because I know I was fairly open about just saying, like, hey, it's not even so much that the community needs to know what your answer is, as much as they need to know a more or less what your general political stance towards this issue is. Like, do you see it as a threat? Do you intend to take action? Period. And I think that the ZenCash team has stepped up beautifully in terms of just saying, like, we do see that these, like you mentioned, decentralization as a problem, pooling is a problem. Rather, centralization is a problem, pooling is a problem, and then proof of work as an area of opportunity for us. Ergo, we're gonna jump into this scrum. We're gonna fight to try to control this problem. So I appreciate that.
I mean, the only way to be truly censorship resistant is to completely decentralize every single area of your organization. And mining is a huge part of our organization. It's a massive part of the ZenCash ecosystem. So allowing it to be massively centralized, it doesn't not do us any favors at all. So we are committed to maintaining decentralization as best as possible. It's just a case of how we go about that and where it sits in the priorities. So as everybody watching this stream is super aware of, we were 51% attacked, and that has just jumped straight to the top of the queue. So,
well, hey, I didn't want to bring up anything sensitive.
Yeah,
you know,
it's not sensitive. It's happened, and we're working very hard to modify Satoshi consensus to eliminate that threat, not just for us, but for the whole proof of work industry.
Okay, phenomenal. Yeah, I read that you'd worked with the exchanges to ensure that you could buy yourself a little more time in the event of this happening again. That sound right? Among the countermeasures that were deployed?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was our sticky plaster fix. It was, we've just been attacked. Let's tell everybody while it's still ongoing, raise your confirmations from 12 or 5 or whatever the case was, up to at least 100. And what that did is it basically bought everybody time to really try and analyze the issue and figure out what's going on. The midterm fix is to modify Satoshi consensus so that if you mine in private and you hold a bunch of blocks back, and when you broadcast to the network, they don't just automatically become the new or the legitimate chain simply because they have the highest block height. You need to further verify your blocks. So the penalty that we're implementing is that if you've held back a whole load of different blocks with a higher block height, when you broadcast them, you need to continue mining for a substantial amount of time before that will be taken and accepted by the network. And what that allows us to do is basically play tunes with the cost of an attack. So our attack was not in a massive amount of money to pull off. They needed to buy 3,300 Zen, and they needed to spend probably $50,000 on hash power, which is an embarrassingly small amount of money to pull off an attack, particularly when you look at the previous way where you would have to spend a large volume of capital on miners and all the rest of it. Going forward, the fix would allow us to bring the cost of an attack up to very, very similar costs to Bitcoin. If not more, we can basically play tunes with it to suit.
Awesome. Okay, that's phenomenal. That's phenomenal news. Great to hear. And I want to say that Rob mentioned that over on it's so hard for me not to say his first name because he's trying so hard to brand his blind run on Son of a Tech. But yeah, he's a good guy. He's a really good guy. I respect the heck out of his channel. I respect the heck out of his work ethic and what he does. I know that he runs a couple of pools too, which, by the way, hey, man, why aren't you running a ZenCash pool? We got to talk sometime offline.
An official ZenCash pool.
Whoa. What is this news? Okay.
We've been toying with the idea a few times. So decentralization of our hash power is important. There's lots of options to ensure that our pools don't get too large. And throwing an official pool into the mix may be an option, or it could make it worse. But it's an idea we have been throwing around for sure.
Okay, awesome. Well, I mean, wow, it's, for us doing kind of a sweet and condensed interview, because I know I know you're working on a sleep deficit. So am I. Maybe the delirium is keeping me from keeping this as streamlined as it could be. Let me ask you a couple more questions and try to stay back on track so you don't totally creep out of control with the running length of this interview. But we talked about ASIC resistance.
No worries.
Talked about why it mattered. We talked about centralization versus the imperative, right? The moral imperative to decentralize. If you believe in crypto, the future of crypto, you've got to believe in decentralization. It sounds like we're on the same page, everyone. Proof of work in general, we talked about briefly. Staking and other consensus models, if there were some kind of demonstrable benefit and if there was some kind of track record put in place by a team or a project that you felt you could trust, do you think that the ZenCash project could or would adapt? Like, would there be... How hard would that be culturally to say, hey, look, proof of stake is working over here. Here's how. Or some other very green consensus model. What would that take?
So we very much focus on kind of research first and do things the right way and really be scientific about how we go about problems. So at this point, nothing is off the table. Proof of stake, in my opinion, is still a young technology. It hasn't had the kind of rigorous testing that proof of work has. So yeah, I mean, at this point in time, proof of stake doesn't make a huge amount of sense to swap entirely to. But we are heavily considering moving over to a hybrid proof of work, proof of stake system, whereby, again, as another layer of kind of protection from 51% attacks, our upcoming supernode network. So our supernodes are a new tier of node. They introduce sidechains and they'll allow us to not just develop applications ourselves, but also open the whole network up to everybody developing applications on top of it.
Okay, so wait, this is big. So this is platform level functionality, platform level utility, and Absolutely. This is already on the public roadmap.
It certainly is, yeah. So
okay.
The upcoming fork on July 19th, and the main reason that our engineering team are absolutely flat out is that we are going to do a tweak to our block rewards to allow introduction of supernodes. So supernodes have a higher hardware requirement and they have a higher staking requirement, staking in one of these. So yeah, they're going to be much more robust servers. We're hoping to have a couple of thousand supernodes, as well as probably doubling, if not tripling, the quantity of our secure nodes. So secure node rewards are currently 3.5% of block rewards. It's going to move to 10, and supernodes will also have a separate share of 10%. So the whole idea is to introduce sidechains, and introducing the sidechains opens up massive functionality for the ZenCash network. So we can go down the route of things like instant Zen. We could create our own decentralized exchange. We can do lots of different really cool things for ZenCash as a team. But even cooler than that is we can create smart contracting, and we can really open up ZenCash as a proper platform and allow people all around the world equal opportunity to jump in and create something on our platform.
Okay, this is awesome. Very selfishly, I want to see ZenPub happen because there's a reason this interview isn't happening on DTube.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm getting lag just now, actually. So yeah, for sure. I mean, there's definitely better ways to be doing these.
Awesome. Okay, so yeah, pardon my ignorance. I tried to do a bit of homework, and I saw that briefly on the roadmap. I thought, and I was just thinking, okay, well, I interviewed a block producer candidate for EOS, and there are so many platform level utility chains, blockchains that are projects that are happening, that it's been hard for me to track which projects are aspiring to become platform level blockchain utilities rather. And so this is awesome. This is quite huge. Without jumping,
I think it's really important for the whole space to be thinking like this, because like I said at the start, we need utility. We need this to be useful. We need to create as many real useful applications as physically possible. And all it's going to take is one of the many crypto platforms to create one really, really useful, cool application that's going to get massive real world use. And all of a sudden, crypto moves away from being from the geeks right into being with the masses, which is what we need. So yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of a difference between us and some of the other startups that are creating new platforms in that we've kind of got the infrastructure in place already. So phase one of ZenCash, build a secure, privacy-oriented cryptocurrency. Phase two, let's create a kick-ass infrastructure that's really strong and robust. At the moment, we're reasonably confident we have the second biggest infrastructure in the whole industry, which is pretty crazy for a coin with the market cap that we have. And then phase 3 is let's use that platform to really create some useful products, and let's start launching them and aiming them at mass market.
Okay, awesome. And these are all meant to be proof of proof of concept for that new platform. What is the incentive to bring on outside developers? And what is the timeline to bring on outside developers? You have, for example, you've got EOS that's attracting people. You've got Quantum. You've got NEM, right? You've got these other projects they've been able to successfully attract outside development teams to come in and start building do their launches on these other networks. How is ZenCash going to handle that? I mean, outside of mining right now, let's step into some long-term evolution here. How will developers start to flock to ZenCash?
So that's going to be the big challenge for us, really creating a real pool that draws in talented developers and explains the benefits of really developing on Zen, to really get them in and make the ecosystem what we want it to be. At the moment, it's us doing development. Timeline-wise, we're aiming to open up the network, as it were, towards the end of this year. So we're not talking miles into the future. Supernodes go live in roughly 1 month from now. That's step 1. We're going to be paying node operators just to have the infrastructure running, even though they won't have any kind of taxing processes or anything ran on the hardware. It'll just be, let's prep, let's get it ready, let's make sure the infrastructure exists and we're confident. And then from there, start developing everything that's required on a kind of core tech basis to really make it work.
Okay, so no false starts with the main net. I mean, I'm not naming names, but
yeah, I wouldn't like to say. I wouldn't like to comment. We'll try our best.
Awesome. Okay, so hey, I thoroughly appreciate you taking a little bit of extra time to talk about the entire, a bit more of the roadmap on ZenCash. Thank you for pardoning my ignorance. I also ask some of these questions for the benefit of viewers who just might not be super familiar with ZenCash project. I imagine there are going to be several viewers from your community here supporting and down in the comments, vocally supportive. If you are here as a ZenCash supporter, please be vocally supportive in the comments. If you're here as somebody who either doesn't know much about ZenCash, or perhaps you don't think it's a great project today, please be clear and please be constructive in your criticism. Please ask good questions, and make sure that you do so publicly down in the comments. The mudslinging, the FUD, I just don't publish it. That is the great thing about YouTube, is that I can just straight up ban you from my comment section. So don't be an idiot. So yeah, Rowan, appreciate having you on the show. Last and most important question. Okay,
go for it. Shoot.
When were you going to transfer me that 25,000 Zen for this interview?
You're going to need me a couple of days to pull it out of my Swiss account.
I thought you were going to say pull out of somewhere else, because I didn't ask for it, right? This was not an extorted interview. Okay, I go out of my way.
If you don't own Zen already, though, we need to get you a couple of Zen so you can at least go and try it out. So I'm sure we can sort that out for sure.
Well, I'm sure that I'll mind some. Yeah, sure, I've mind some. Just wanted to go out of my way to go on record. Anybody who's already been on the channel knows that I do not take paid interviews. For now, if anything is a sponsored video, I very clearly disclose it, and I just don't believe in extorted interviews. So this has been an unbiased, unfiltered review and interview. Rowan, did I furnish you any of my questions before we started the interview?
Not at all. No, not at all. And the industry for sure needs more people like you, because everything seems to be about extorting money now. And I don't want to point the finger at YouTubers as a particular, because it's not YouTubers. It's every single facet of the crypto industry seems to be, let's monetize. So it's great. It's great to have somebody like you that actually wants to just have a conversation and spread information among the community. So thanks for having me. And I look forward to seeing some of the feedback in the comments.
Yeah, definitely. We'll have to get you back on the show. We've got a consortium, sort of loose consortium of other projects that are talking about proof of work, the future of proof of work, in open conversations. Maybe we can talk about that at another time. I don't know if perhaps Rob, Rolf, or yourself, or all three would like to join a panel with some of our other shows. Christy from Oh God, a Company, The Minority, she's expressed interest in having a regular segment on the channel as well, where we may be able to do that panel interview just with ZenCash and Christy. But I can't guarantee that, but something along those lines where we do a loose consortium, nothing official, but just a bit of open discourse between projects that use proof of work and talking about some of the problems that to date have seemed intractable, and just trying to put the best minds together in terms of proof of work. Would that interest you?
Absolutely, yeah. More than happy to do that. That'd be great.
Okay, awesome. Then I guarantee we will be talking again soon. Rowan, great to have you on the show. Hey, everybody, if you're just tuning in or if you've made it all the way to this point, thank you for watching the interview in its entirety. Thank you for hitting the subscribe button down below. Thank you for clicking the little bell icon so you're notified when new interviews come out. This one didn't go live, but you know what? Life is full of little compromises, it seems, at times. So thank you for bearing with us as well. You're the reason I do these interviews. So love your face. I will see you in the next one.
Yeah.